Cell towers come with many warning labels. One of them is what you're seeing here. Warning: invisible laser radiation. Avoid overexposure to beam. Not sure how many of you can read English out there, but this is one of the warning labels. Invisible laser radiation. A lot of people aren't imagining lasers are shooting out of these cell towers, but in fact they are. A lot of people think that lasers are confined to the visible spectrum of light. But if you look at the chart of EMF radiation, electromagnetic frequency radiation, it's everything from 0 hertz to X-rays and the like. And so when they say that these cell towers are projecting laser beams, that's exactly what they're doing. You just don't see them because they're outside the visible spectrum of light. Not only are they shooting out laser beams, but they're also shooting out omnidirectional radiation. The more classic concept of cell phone technology. But the new 5G especially focuses on beamforming technology. They're shooting lasers at people. And this can be used for nefarious purposes. They can target people based on their social media profile. And if you don't think they're targeting you with invisible weapons, you're not paying attention. Now, before we get into all of that, a lot of people think that cell towers and cell phone technology is safe because it's non-ionizing radiation. Let's spend a little time thinking about that concept, non-ionizing radiation. What does that mean exactly? It means that if it were ionizing radiation, when it hit an atom, it would turn it into an ion. It would excite the electrons to such a degree that the electrons would actually shoot out of their orbit like some kind of nuclear reactor. Now, we're not going to get into nuclear physics and the neutron explosions in fusion reactors, but essentially the concept is very similar when it comes to ionizing radiation. Now, with non-ionizing radiation, what happens is that the radiation hits the atom or the molecule, but in theory, it doesn't have enough energy to actually turn that atom into an ion. So does that mean that this radiation is actually safe? And a lot of people think, yes, obviously, if it's not ionizing, then it's safe. But let's think about what they're actually emitting from these towers, which is classically between 800 megahertz and 2 gigahertz. Now, Wi-Fi runs on 2.5 gigahertz. 2.5 gigahertz also runs your microwave oven. Not a lot of people know that, but it's the same microwave technology. And there's not a lot of difference between what the 5G is using and what's in your microwave oven or your Wi-Fi. But let's think about what a microwave oven does. If you put something in there long enough, it'll cook it. And so what happens during the cooking process, what happens during combustion or processes of that nature, is that it's actually breaking down the molecules and turning them into simpler compounds, which in fact is what cooking is all about. And so if you think cooking is a harmless process, then you're definitely not paying attention. We wanted to say something worse, but it is what it is. Obviously, if this technology can cook, then it's not harmless. Now, the question is, what are they actually pumping out of these death towers that are connected to the main grid, which is running on kilovolts and megawatts? Nobody really knows what these cell towers are pumping out. But obviously, long-term exposure to this type of radiation is dangerous, to say the least. We've seen countless cases of cancer next to these towers, countless cases of cancers linked to the cell phones, which is using the same technology. And so to classify this technology as safe is no different than what they've been doing with the vaccines and many other products that are in our supermarkets. If you look at the ingredients in most of the food, you can't even recognize half of what's in there. Our food is illegal in most other countries, and yet they sell it to little children, the breakfast cereals and the like. So if you don't think that they would do something nefarious with the cell phone technology, then obviously you must be vaccinated. But again, the big misconception here is that if it's non-ionizing, then it's safe. Your microwave oven is non-ionizing radiation. Would you consider that safe? The question is, how safe is it? And with these people, it's all about long-term side effects, because that way it looks like natural causes. It looks like cancer. And they make a ton of money trying to find out what's wrong with you. You see all these people that have been vaccinated, they're getting tested and scanned, MRIs, the works. Each person, each vaccine victim is running up $100,000 plus bill trying to find out what's wrong with them. And essentially it's no different for all of the other cancer-causing products that are out there, sold to us as safe and effective. What is the video guy doing? So this technology is not safe, and it's not really effective either. They were making calls to the moon in the 1960s, but somehow now we need a cell tower every 5 feet. And what's remarkable, really, is that they were using shortwave radio telephones back in the 1940s. This technology has been around for a long time, and they didn't need cell towers. Every 50 feet or so. So to call this technology effective is essentially misleading. Unless you're talking about effective at killing people, because we know that this technology is essentially slow kill. And that's a word that many people are familiar with these days, but it's never on the news. The documents are everywhere. The NASA documents, the government documents, they're out there to try to kill you and get away with it. That's what they do. That's pretty much all they do. And so they call the product safe and effective. But what they really mean is the total opposite. You have to put on the Hoffman lenses to see what these people are actually doing. And the question really comes down to who are these people on television. They don't pass the Turing test. They're just totally out of their minds. They have their agenda that is just inhuman, to say the least. You see what's happening in the big cities, the tent cities, the people on the streets, the drug crisis. These people don't care about Americans. It's kind of offensive to watch them put on little American pins or lapels or hold the flag or something like that, claiming that they love America and love Americans when they're just dooming the country for their politics. And what is their politics? It's much worse than Sodom and Gomorrah. It's a cult of death. It's Jonestown. These people want to genocide the entire planet. What do you think Skull and Bones represents? It represents death. It's a cult of death. These people want to kill everyone. That's their business. Don't ask us how people get this way, but it usually starts at a young age. In any case, that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a total takeover of our country by a cult of death. They own the corporations, they run the television, they steal the elections. There's no escaping their control, if you will. Certainly not by voting or by doom scrolling online. There's no voting these people out. But people should be very concerned about this technology that's around them. There's a reason why you can't opt out of this technology. They didn't want you opting out of the vaccines. They didn't want you getting the hydroxychloroquine. And they don't want you opting out of these death towers either. And there's a reason for that. And so many of you out there are just kind of willfully ignorant of the dangers. You're like, well, I know it's not cool to be on the cell phone, but I don't really take it seriously. And by the time people do take it seriously, it's too late. And so we strongly recommend that you really just kind of phase out cell phone technology from your life. Not only your phones, but the towers in your neighborhoods. People are finding constructive ways of getting rid of these things. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, how do I communicate with people online? I mean, there's still Ethernet out there, isn't there? I mean, do people still use that? Probably not. But there are ways to survive without using a smartphone. We've been doing this broadcast for 10 years and we don't use a smartphone to do it. And so it's possible. We've reached hundreds of millions of people out there over the years without the use of a cell phone. And so it's possible. It's not as convenient, but it has its benefits. People can't reach you. They get the voicemail. They get the answering machine. So that's kind of the old school thinking that you have to have if you want to be safe. But of course, the dangers don't really stop with the cell towers or the cell phones. You obviously have the Wi-Fi to think about, the wireless accessories, the hotspots. And there's a lot of other radiation that's impacting your community. Radio towers, television towers, satellite broadcasting, raining down death. And so just phasing out the obvious isn't enough either. You really have to monitor your environment, and you have to employ shielding if you want to be sure. And a lot of people are just like, that sounds like way too much work. Doesn't it? And that really comes down to a personal choice. Some people don't care about what they eat or what they drink or what they breathe. Some people do. So it's a personal choice. Do you protect yourself from this type of radiation? We feel that it's a strong variable in their equation for Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. They're counting on these death towers to kill people. And so you probably shouldn't underestimate the effects of weapons that you can't see. The whole point of using invisible, silent weapons is so that people don't defend themselves. And essentially, with all of the different towers out there, it's like dealing with sniper attacks. Really. And of course, it gets worse if you're on the red list. And all of you are definitely on the red list by now. So we strongly recommend protection. We've talked about shielding. People should research Faraday shielding, Faraday materials, and personal shielding as well. We strongly recommend personal shielding. It's kind of difficult during the summer, but they like to zap people at the grocery store. They like to zap people at the shopping center. Sometimes even at work or at school. We're getting reports that people's children are being attacked as well. And so, what do you do these days? You have to realize it's a war. You have to realize that you're the enemy. You have to realize who's doing this to you. And then you can start acting accordingly. Otherwise, you're just some kind of cow grazing in the pasture, waiting for the slaughterhouse, a gazelle, some kind of poor defenseless little animal. And these monsters will take advantage of you. You kind of have to show them that you're serious. And you can't be stupid about it either, because if you're stupid about it, then as soon as you make a mistake, it's all over. And so it's not what you know, it's what you can prove that matters. Really. So people really need to think about the situation and think about how important surviving is. Leave it there for this broadcast. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Until the next time. If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.